Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Sophfronia Scott, Director of the Alma College MFA in Creative Writing, and this is our virtual open house featuring faculty member Jim Daniels. The Alma College MFA is a low residency graduate program. I am going to briefly share my screen and show you a few images connected to our program. And I'm going to admit someone into the waiting room. Okay. So these images are actually from our most recent residency at the University of Oxford. The Alma College program is low residency, so the students are only in person twice a year in January and August. Sometimes we're at Alma College, which we will be for this coming January residency and the August 2026. But this past August, we were at the University of Oxford, which was a wonderful experience. Jim, I was noticing that in some of these pictures, you're like in the back, like you're like behind me, peeking your head out back there. Maybe it's because you're tall. You find that in a few of these pictures, I notice you're kind of sticking out in the back there.
Yeah.
But we have these wonderful excursions, and everything that we usually do at residency happens on these travel residencies. There are lectures, there are workshops, but we also have the added bonus of these adventures, like visiting Radcliffe Camera and having after hours tours of places like the Bodleian Library. This is an image of me writing in one of the great halls at University College. So I think it's important for writers to experience different spaces. There you are, Jim, in the Bodleian Library. And it's such an inspiring experience, not only to be inspired by this different space, but to walk in the footsteps of other famous writers. The students even did a bike ride to go visit the grave of J.R.R. Tolkien, going to well, we were going to go to the pub where C.S. Lewis hung out, but we found out it was under renovation. But it was just a special experience. We also have students. This particular lecturer is someone who graduated from our program, and he wanted to come along in the residency and also lecture on what he's been studying concerning AI and creative writing. So it is a variety of experiences. Um, when you come to residency, it's a particular bonding experience. The students are very supportive of each other. There are a couple of student-only meetings each residency. There's also a night of student readings and that they organize. And they stay in connection not only between the residencies, but after. We also have students who are doing projects together even after they've graduated. There you are again, Jim, sticking like tiny, like all the way back there. Hi, Jim. Uh, but it's a wonderful experience. We all um, have this wonderful community. And I think that's what you get when you're in a program like this. You are a part of this wonderful artistic community where your writing just grows tremendously over the course of the 2 years that you're participating. There is no GRE required. We also have no application fee. This type of program fits into a busy schedule. You don't have to move. You don't have to leave a job. So we have a variety of ages in the program. We have people who are just out of college all the way up to people who have retired. And it's a vibrant community because of that. We offer the genres of fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. We also offer you the option to do either a mixed genre where you try your hand for one semester in one extra genre, or you can do a full dual genre degree where you do 3 terms in a major genre and 2 terms in a minor genre. That one requires that you do 6 residencies instead of 5. Now, the rest of the semester, the residency is what kicks off the semester. The rest of the semester, you are working one-on-one with a faculty advisor. You are delivering creative work to that person. During the residency, you come up with a schedule together. You collaborate on a reading list and a series of deadlines for creating for submitting packets of critical and creative work, usually every 3 to 4 weeks. Now, because of this setup, you have these amazing discussions, you get inspired. You may find that you're writing things that you never expected to write, which I think is an amazing thing. I also believe in bringing in industry experts so that you gain some knowledge about the publishing industry, including where your work fits into the marketplace. You learn to read and think critically as a writer, and you develop a strong understanding of craft, and the ability to lecture on technique. So, what's wonderful about this is that what I call it is you learn to wield your talent with intention. I've already spoken to several prospective students these past couple of weeks who've told me that, they enjoy writing. They've, managed to write a few things, but they know that they don't have a grasp on craft. And they're kind of like flying by the seat of their pants, and they, on a certain level, don't know what they're doing. So coming to a program like this, you not only learn craft, but you have a language for what you're doing. So you can make attempts for things you've never tried before. You can learn how to read critically so you can see how other writers have done it. And you are guided by your amazing faculty advisors. You have a different advisor each semester. And because you work so closely with your advisor, we tend to feature them in these virtual open houses. And tonight we are featuring Jim Daniels. Jim is actually a graduate of Alma College. He graduated from Alma in 1978. He has authored 28 collections of poetry, 6 collections of fiction, and 4 produced screenplays. His first work of nonfiction, An Ignorance of Trees, came out in August 2025. He will be reading from that this evening. But he also has this amazing collection coming out on January 1st, Late Invocation for Magic. I love that title. New and Selected Poems coming out from Michigan State University Press. Jim is a recipient of 2 fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts and 2 from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. His books have won 3 Michigan Notable Awards, the Brittingham Prize for Poetry, the Blue Lynx Prize for Poetry, the Tilly Olson Creative Writing Award, the Milton Kessler Award, and 3 gold medals in the Independent Publisher Book Awards, among others. And his films have won many awards in film festivals around the world. So, as you can tell, we have a multi-talented person with us today. Thank you, Jim, for joining us.
Thank you, Sophronia, and welcome all the people who are in the Zoom here. So I'm going to read you. I'm in the Detroit area right now, though I live in Pittsburgh, but I'm visiting my father and clearing out his condominium. And one of the things we found today was a stack of these family calendars. My wife in particular would make every year with family photos on them. A lot of families do that. So that is prompting me to read this essay called The Family Calendar. For many years, my wife Kristen and I made a calendar for my family, choosing pictures from a selection sent in by my brothers and sister, my parents, and Elaine, my father's cousin. We marked birthdays, anniversaries, special family events, and selected the appropriate icons: birthday cakes, champagne glasses, balloons. Elaine was an only child with an only child, had few relatives, so we drew her into our family. We celebrated her birthday, March 18th. One Christmas Eve, she died of stomach cancer. We had known she was going, and she knew too. In early December that year, as we put the next year's calendar together, we faced a dilemma: where to put Elaine. During the first 6 years of calendars, we hadn't lost anyone. Each year had brought just happy additions. More recently, our daughter, Rosalie. Then, suddenly, we had to mark a different kind of event for which we had no icon. Elaine was the first to send her photos in that year. They arrived in August, long before we'd even thought about next year's calendar. She was getting chemo at the time, coping with nausea and weakness and fear. She sent a number of old extended family Christmas photos, along with a recent one of her in a luxurious dress she wore to a benefit ball at Somerset Mall, the fanciest mall in the Detroit area. She'd lost weight due to the chemo, so she had bought a new fancy dress just for the occasion. A friend of hers had bought her a ticket, knowing how few opportunities Elaine had to dress up, knowing she was dying. For a while, it didn't look like she'd be healthy enough to even go to the ball, but she lasted till midnight. She stood alone in the photo as she had much of her life. Along with the pictures, she sent a note. All my hair's fallen out, so I'm an old baldy now, but I've got a fancy wig. Two exclamation points. That was how Elaine lived her life, even when everyone else was giving her question marks, ellipses. She didn't have many family photos because for a long time it was just her and Bill, her son. She raised him by herself in the projects in Detroit. Her husband had abandoned them both. The first real grief I ever saw was Bill's. He occasionally spent the weekend with us to give his mother a break. He was years older than me and my brothers and sister, and we admired him as a huge, invincible force. He was always big, tall, and husky, like his mother. But one Saturday morning, I came out of the boy's bedroom to find him in my father's arms as he bawled, pure weeping over a family he didn't have. In October of the year she died, Elaine asked me if I knew of any good Catholic cemeteries. My only experience has been as an altar boy many, many years ago. I told her about riding with the priests in the limo with E.J. Manswick, the funeral director, his stinky cigars, how they nauseated me, how afterwards the priests usually slipped us some money. We used to get out of school too. We went to either Whitechapel or the other one out by the airport, Mount something or another. Old cemeteries had a lot of grass, well maintained. I wanted to keep our conversation on the surface, moving as far from the black earth underneath that impossibly green grass that I could find. I went on, and she just let me. Finally, I just shrugged. She shrugged back and laughed, like she always did. What makes a good cemetery anyway? I don't think either of us knew. Where to put Elaine in the calendar when we knew she wouldn't live out the year. Kristen suggested putting her on the cover. It had so far been reserved for grandchildren, and enough new ones had come along to make that an easy choice. But we were done with that. Rosalie would be the last grandchild. That's pretty maudlin, don't you think? I said. Here, Elaine, you're dying, so you get to be on the cover. But if we put her inside, won't it just make everybody sad having to see her picture every day for a month if she's already dead? If we put her in the early months, maybe she'll still be alive. We had to put her somewhere. We had her photographs and we loved her. Finally, we put her in January, holding Rosalie, whose birthday is January 12th, and in March, in honor of her own birthday, wearing the Cinderella dress she'd be buried in. She didn't live to see the calendar. My mother gave it to Bill after the funeral. We were the only family he had left. Kristen and I recently downsized to a condo, taking a hard look at what to take with us. I went through all of our old photo albums, downsizing them too, but we kept the calendars. I think we stopped doing them when everything went digital and we could just attach photos to emails and share them with one click. My father, age 95, never learned to use a computer. We celebrated his 95th birthday last month. Though he quit taking pictures a long time ago, he wanted my sister to print some up from the party for him. He has become an aficionado of large calendars with big squares. They help keep his memory alive. He attached some of those photos to it, making his own family calendar. In the condo, tossing pictures from all the albums, I got distracted by the stack of calendars, looking at the photo of Elaine holding Rosalie on her lap and reading her a book. I remember celebrating Rosalie's birthday that year. Despite our fears, it was a comfort to see Elaine there with Rosalie all of January. That photo is next to one of my mother holding Rosalie. My mother died 2 years ago, legally blind, wheelchair bound, and losing her mind. I remember thoughtlessly bringing pictures of our children to show her at a point where she was relying more on voices than faces to identify people. Calendars mark our days, the small boxes of our lives, one after another. There were more pictures of Rosalie in the calendar than anyone else. Editor's privilege. Elaine never had much. She worked for 20th Century Fox until retirement. At the end, she faded quickly so that the money she'd saved to die at home didn't run out. Hospice stayed with her. Dying at home was her only wish. Her home was a tiny apartment in a big complex, a short bus ride to the nearest mall. Elaine had never been able to afford a car. She was a large, busty woman with a big head of curly blonde hair. I imagine her firmly planted on the sidewalk, waiting for her bus. No giggle, no titter. She offered instead the solid fullness of her laugh, and it drew people to her. You felt safe around that laugh. She loved dressing up and going out. She liked highballs and the flash of costume jewelry. My mother told me they were suggesting donations to hospice instead of flowers. I didn't go against my mother's wishes often, but I couldn't picture the empty room, her casket unadorned, a jacket without a big gold brooch on the lapel. I sent flowers. What can I say about Elaine to make her alive for you, to keep you from being as bored as you would be looking through my family calendar, crossing off the days? In Italian cemeteries, gravestones include a photo of the dead. When I lived in Torre Gentile on sabbatical back in 1989, my biggest fear was that someone I loved would die when I was so far away. I didn't have a phone and could only be reached by mail. It was the way I wanted it, but what if? What if? I often visited the village cemetery at the top of a hill nearby, staring at the small circles of glass, enclosing the photos of people I didn't know. Seeing them healthy and happy, I could imagine the little village peopled by those faces, the cemetery, a village itself. Once a grieving family piled slowly out of a dusty, beat-up car. It hadn't rained in months, and their black dresses dragging over the path into the cemetery became dusted with pale dirt. I panicked as they approached, trapped within the stone walls. The oldest woman wailed in grief. I quickly squeezed out the gate past them, head down. There's no practice for this. I could imagine a late night phone call, but I couldn't answer it. That January, after Elaine died, we traveled to France on my first sabbatical since the Italy trip. I had thought Elaine would die while we were there, but right before we left, Christmas morning, my mother called with the news. We had a phone in France. We had two young children. We needed to be in touch in case. Elaine gave me my first drink when I was a teenager. She poured a little booze in my eggnog, winking at me while my parents sat in the other room. We visited her small apartment and parkside projects every Christmas. The seven of us sprawled over the ragged furniture stuffed into her tiny living room. Sometimes I drove her home from my parents' house after a family gathering. She was quiet during those rides through the dark, shy almost. Thanks for the ride, Jimmy. Then out the door, waving from the entrance to her apartment as I drove away. She doted on my children, on all children. They made her laugh her cartoon laugh. You never knew when she really thought something was funny. She was often the last one laughing, and you could hear something in that. I try to keep in touch with people from my past. I feel a small death when someone completely disappears. Where are they? What are they doing out there somewhere? Do they ever think of me? I've searched for a way to both hold on and let go, but downsizing made me let go of a lot. Old clothes that were out of fashion and no longer fit, kept in my closet just to know where they were, even though I never wore them. They had to go. Not letting go kept me in protracted breakups that stretched over years. There never seemed to be a final goodbye, always one more phone call, maybe a birthday, maybe no occasion at all. Just to check in, see how you're doing. Then why not stop by sometime? One year at Christmas, when I was back in Detroit, I visited an old girlfriend from high school, and we sat kissing on her couch. Then suddenly she pulled me to my feet. You'll have to leave. My boyfriend's coming back. He lives here with me. I didn't blame her for not telling me earlier. She wanted to hold on too for a few minutes. My grandfather lived until age 95. Every time I visited, I thought it might be the last time, but our goodbyes were casual nevertheless. When we were kids, he always stood on the porch or at the door, waving till we were out of sight, and he still did that to the very end. I like the illusion of him waving there forever. Maybe eternal life is like that. The last time I saw Elaine, I knew it was the last. I hugged her an extra long hug while taking in her heavy perfume. She had lost over 50 pounds, and I was startled by how little there was there. When someone has terminal cancer, you can't just say, "I hope you get better soon." I was trying to be so careful, all I could finally manage was take care. My father was dropping Elaine off on the way home. I was behind him in my car with Kristen and the kids. My headlights lit up his van, and I could see Elaine's golden wig glowing. When they turned off the main road, I wanted to follow, to keep her in light, but they disappeared in darkness. The next year, we had no new pictures, and Elaine got left off the calendar. We try to let go of the old in order to welcome the new. Isn't that the idea of the calendar starting January 1? Will we ever get it right? I should have told Elaine about those cemeteries in Italy. Looking at her picture on the calendar is like having Elaine's photo under glass. I can touch her face while she holds my daughter. We imagined we would always keep the calendar going, the annual Christmas ritual of everyone opening theirs at the same time. But we don't all even see each other at Christmas anymore. We're spread across the country, my brothers, my sister, my father. The calendar reminded me that we are a family, but the definitions, the boundaries keep shifting. Is it blood? Is it legal contracts that bind us? My brother's second wife's children from her first marriage have children now, and I've yet to meet them. My mother was with Elaine when she died. She and Elaine had gotten quite close. My mother's health was not good even then. Elaine didn't care what readings were chosen for her funeral, what the songs were, so my mother used ones she'd already selected for her own funeral. She wanted to try them out, see how they sounded, and she knew Elaine wouldn't mind. I missed Elaine's funeral. I didn't miss my mother's. We returned from France at the end of April that year. My grandfather died in June. My mother had called one Sunday. Grandpa isn't going to last much longer. He stopped eating. My mother, a nurse, knew when people were giving up. Okay, I said, swallowing hard. I'll try to get home next week. He might not last that long, she said. I'll get home, I said. That night, lying in bed, I realized I'd been cold on the phone, irritated by the inconvenience, the marring of my personal calendar. I got up and looked at the calendar in the kitchen's yellow light while Kristen and the kids slept above me. I had a softball game Monday night. I would go home Tuesday. We lost the game. The next morning, as I poured coffee in my thermos for the drive, my father called. My grandfather had died in the night. He would have been 96 on June 25th. In his calendar picture, he too is holding Rosalie on his lap. Is holding, was holding, will always hold. When I was growing up, my other grandmother lived with us for 15 years. I used to close the bedroom door a certain way in order to hear a distinct click. I believed that click kept her alive somehow. At dinner at my sister's, it didn't have to be the last time I saw Elaine either. I could have seen both her and my grandfather again before they died. Calling it fear is not enough. My life's calendar in front, all those clean blank squares, behind the X's of disappointment, the question marks of the unresolved. Kristen and Rosalie were both sick. We were supposed to go to Detroit for our family Christmas visit before leaving for France on New Year's, a departure imprinted on the new calendar we were giving out as presents. I decided to take Ramsey myself for a quick visit home to exchange presents. It would be at least 4 months before we'd be seeing family again. The only Christmas I'd ever missed was the year Rosalie was born. Ramsey and I sat in my parents' crowded living room. Wrapping paper tore across laughter and surprise as we had an early Christmas with my siblings and their children. Adults and kids sprawled over the floor, sitting on each other's laps, cameras flashing and whirring, while a hospice worker sat with Elaine in her silent apartment. My mother had just come back from visiting her. She slipped into a hardback dining room chair next to the couch where I sat holding Ramsey. "How's she doing?" I asked. "I'm not sure she knows who I am anymore. She won't make it till the new year." Elaine's calendar sat at my feet in bright wrapping paper stacked with the others. I handed them out all at once for the ritual unveiling. Who got the cover spot? My nephew Matthew, the first grandchild graduating high school, a new landmark to celebrate. Elaine's calendar sat, almost hidden beneath scattered wrapping paper. I gently pushed it under the couch so it would not get buried, or just a little buried. "Do you think I should go see her?" I asked my mother. Before she could answer, I asked, "Do you think it would make any difference to her?" She knew I didn't want to go. Elaine's position on the edge of our family blurred the lines of responsibility and love. "No, I don't think it would matter," she said. "If you go, it should be for yourself, not for her." Ramsey was opening his presents, giggling madly among his cousins on the floor. The next day was Christmas Eve. We'd be driving back to Pittsburgh to spend Christmas Day as a family. Kristen, Rosalie, me, Ramsey, just us. I'm sitting here with that old calendar next to me, looking at December. I made a mistake. Elaine and my grandfather are in one more picture. One of the Christmas shots Elaine sent. It's the 50s. My grandparents, Elaine, her parents, my parents, and Bill, all squeezed into the living room of my grandparents' old house. I can't figure out who took the photo, who's missing. My parents are just kids, newlyweds, childless. My father and Bill are the only ones still alive from that picture. At my grandfather's funeral, Bill stood outside the church smoking. He was a prison guard living in a house trailer at the time, ex-Marine, ex-motorcycle gang member, ex-son, still unmarried. We were still it for him, family. I saw him brush away a tear before coming in and telling my father, "Meeting like this gets old fast." My brother and his wife from California had made the long trek back for the funeral. He was already checking in on his phone for their return flights the next day to, to where he now called home. It was June 6th, my birthday. The next day was my nephew's high school graduation party. My brother and grandfather would both miss the parties. Hoping to clear out my grandfather's house, I grabbed one of his many toolboxes and filled it with some of his hundreds of tools. He was a mechanic for life. I loved their heft as I carried them to the car, as heavy as one of my children. My sister stuck birthday candles in a funeral pie one of the neighbors had sent over. She lit them, and my family circled around me and sang. I blew out the candles. Kristen snapped a photo. That's a keeper for next year's calendar, somebody said. So that's family calendar. And
Wow.
I hope some of you may have connected to that in terms of your own complicated, often complicated families. So, as Sophronia said, I teach and write poetry, fiction, and nonfiction, and in the Alma program. And that's one of the things I really like about it is that the crossing over between the different kinds of writing, as opposed to, labeling, oh, you're this kind of writer, or you're that kind of writer. And I think one of the things the students get from being together is a sense of, hey, we're all writers, period. And that's gives us enough in common for us to build friendships for the rest of our lives, really. We see it every residency.
Yeah. And Jim, that's what happened to me as well as an MFA student. I went in as a novelist and came out, yeah, this multi-genre writer. And it's this miraculous thing, but I think it's part of understanding craft that you no longer see those boundaries, that you realize that whatever it is that you're trying to do, that you have this whole, world of different ways to write open to you.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the great things Sophronia has done is she's put together an incredible faculty where a lot of the writers write in more than one genre and are very enthusiastic. I, we as a faculty get closer to every residency as well, and I think that's a real tangible thing that you would feel if you joined us in the program, and very welcoming to new students. Sophronia mentioned having student-only meetings, and they have one at the beginning of the residency where they talk to the new students and welcome them without any faculty or the rest of us being present, which is really important.
Jim, before I open it up to questions, because I'm sure people want to ask you about the beautiful writing that you just shared with us, but I am wondering, this is your first book of nonfiction, and I guess I'm just curious about why now?
Yeah, writing is, uh, and I assume that everyone who's joining us on Zoom are writers themselves. It's a funny, strange thing, and I think I don't know how well I can articulate it, but I just started moving more and more. I started out as a poet, so I had published a number of books of poetry before I started writing short stories. And to be honest, I haven't been able to write a novel. I I guess I'm kind of hooked on the shorter forms. So that's one thing that I haven't done because I guess I really like the compression of it. But I started relaxing in a way that, and maybe it has something to do with age in terms of more reflecting back. It's certainly in that essay that I read, there's that sense of, how past and present come together or separate us as well. But I really got interested in the, I think the more we write, the more we want to challenge ourselves. And I got interested in the idea of, well, of course, nonfiction, you're limited by it being true, as opposed to, uh, poetry and fiction. I can make stuff up, even if there's an autobiographical element. If I want to turn and say, oh, well, what if this happens? I can just go there. And nonfiction really keeps you from going there. And it's not that I'd never tried nonfiction before, but I started. Yeah, the book is called "An Ignorance of Trees." And I guess one of the things I've found at this point in my life is that I'm still ignorant of a lot of things. So maybe I'll do a whole series of ignorance books about various things I don't know that maybe when I was younger I thought I knew a little more.
Okay. Thank you. I like that idea. I hope you do that. So would anyone else like to ask Jim a question? And Elizabeth, it's wonderful to see you there, and Roger. And everyone, you should know Lindy Blevins, who you see on the screen there. Lindy is a recent graduate of the program. So she studied fiction with us. So feel free to unmute yourself.
I'm happy to ask a question.
Yeah. Hey,
Sure.
Roger.
Jim, thanks for that. I really enjoyed that. And I'd love to hear how you feel about the relationship between your poetry writing and your essay writing. How do they inform one another? Where do you see the kind of the crossover, and maybe where do they diverge for you?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And one of the exercises I gave my workshop in Oxford was to take a piece. So it was a combined workshop of poets and nonfiction writers. So that question you asked is very applicable. And uh, I gave them the assignment of taking something they'd already written in one form, like if they were poets, to take a poem and turn it into nonfiction, or the nonfiction to turn it into a poem, and talk about how it changed. And inevitably it did in terms of and it did for me too. One of the things that I'll actually be talking about at the next residency is the use of the line break in poetry, because that's something you can do in poems that you can't do in nonfiction. So, thinking about the techniques, as Sophfronia was talking about earlier, you do get a good firm grounding in the techniques in the program, and just thinking about what's at your fingertips in terms of the ways to use and manipulate and shape language, whether you're writing poetry or prose, is something that can actually steer me and you in new directions, so that the I should mention I once taught a course called Poets and Their Memoirs. So this is something that I really paid attention to, because a lot of poets end up writing memoirs, and then you read the poems. So in the course, we read the poems and then we read memoirs, and you could see how uh, in many cases where the poems came from in terms of their life, but the poems were shaped differently in terms of what they left out. What they emphasized, and often it's not that prose writers don't pay attention to sound and rhythm, but that's an aspect of poetry that is highlighted a little more traditionally.
Thank you, Roger.
Any other questions or comments? And of course, an opportunity with Sophfronia here to ask anything about the program in
True,
general, but
true.
I just want to say I really appreciate you sharing that piece. I like started out writing poetry and do a lot more like short form, like nonfiction and fiction because of, and so like hearing you say that was helpful about like that maybe like some people we have our preferences for certain kinds of writing. So yeah, I just really appreciate you sharing what you shared.
yeah, it's part of it is instinctual. So one of the contradictions is I think the more you write, the more technique becomes instinctual. So that when I'm writing poetry, I I start breaking my lines based on technique without necessarily thinking about every single line break. But some of them I've done it often enough so I have a feel for, oh, I should break here. Not that I'm not going to change that in the revision, but yeah, it's it's still fun. uh,
So, of course, I have a question and a comment. I would just say that everything Jim said about the students and faculty interacting together is exactly spot on. And I'm a fiction writer, but my first published piece went up this week as nonfiction and on Donald Quest's Past 10. And it
Oh,
starts,
great.
yeah, no, it's out there November 5th. Um, and it starts with a haiku and ends with a haiku. So there you go. Um, so, Jim, so this is what I'd love to see in that lecture when you're talking about line breaks, is how you read a line break. As you're,
Ah,
so you might think about that as you're reading, reading somebody else's work. Wendell Berry does a lot of line breaks where, so when if I'm thinking about how do I read it out loud for someone else, how do I read do I stop? So that might be something to think about.
that's a
That's
great
interesting,
idea.
Lindy, because I was just telling Jim before we began that I looked up one of the writer's almanacs where Garrison Keillor is reading one of Jim's poems. And it was fascinating to hear, and you have the poem on the screen. You can Google it, look it up. Um, but you have the poem on the screen, so you see the line breaks. But I was telling Jim that, Garrison Keillor has that beautiful voice, and that there are times when it almost feels like he's singing the poem. So you're right, it's just a very different experience of somebody else, interpreting those line breaks.
Yeah, and one of the things that, well, a couple things are going on, more than a couple, but a couple things I might mention that are going on in literature is that there are more hybrid forms. So there's more blending of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction, and documentary stuff, and bringing in photos and artwork and film. And so there's a kind of interesting blending and experimentation going on that's pretty exciting. And the the notion of how poets, for example, read their work aloud versus how it looks on the page uh, differs widely on the poets in terms of their own philosophy. And then there's of course the poetry slams and performance poetry that put a lot more emphasis on the oral qualities. In other words, are writing for performance, like a playwright or a screenwriter might do, imagining that the words are embodied in a physical, sensory way as opposed to being read on the page. Great to see you, Lindy. It's a nice surprise.
So we're not having it this residency. Hopefully next summer we'll have Dawn Daniels, who is the owner of Ballyhoo Books, which is the bookstore in Alma, who is sort of like our home for our public readings during the residency. But Dawn Daniels herself is a spoken word artist. And a couple of times I've been able to coax her to do a workshop for the students on reading their work in public, how to do public reading because I do, our students, as I mentioned before, have a student reading, but they are also required to do a lecture of their critical thesis at their fourth residency. And then when they graduate at their last residency, they give a public reading of their work. So the student readings are kind of like 5-minute practices of that leading up to your eventual graduation. But I just believe that that's an important thing to know how to present your work because nobody can read your work the way that you can. So it's important that you put it out there the way that you want to in the world.
Yeah, and there's a fair number of us writers who started writing at least partly because we're introverts uh, and are uncomfortable speaking in public. So I think that's an important aspect of the program in terms of getting comfortable. I mean, you put so much effort into writing the work, putting effort into the presentation of it's important. And I've seen it in students in the program over the course of a couple of years. Just well, we saw it with Joey, the student who did the lecture in Oxford. I mean, just uh, he was a real pro at
Yeah.
his presentation.
Yeah. And Lindy, your lecture, I remember what was that title? It was about sweet potato something, uh, about the Southern Gothic, right? That was just
Beware
that,
the snake and the sweet potato pad, sweet potato.
yes. That was an awesome lecture. So, any other questions? No? Okay, then we will wrap it up for this evening. I will remind you that if you can always email me if anyone would like to have like a private session, a Zoom session, I'm happy to get on a call to answer any questions. I will also say that check your email because there will be an invitation to an open house, a live open house at the residency where you can come visit Alma in January, come meet the faculty, attend lectures, go to a reading, and just get the feel for yourself of what a residency is like. So thank you for being here with us this evening. I'm Sophfronia Scott, he's Jim Daniels, and we are with the Alma College MFA in Creative Writing. You can find out more at alma.edu/MFA. Thank you, and everyone have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.